Most people talk too much about their plans, their goals, their dreams. They announce what they are going to do before they have done anything at all. Feels good in the moment. Feels productive. Feels like progress. But it is not progress. It is comfort. It is validation. And validation is one of the most dangerous drugs in the modern world. The moment you tell people what you are about to do, your brain gets a small reward, as if the work is already finished. And slowly, silently, that reward replaces the hunger to actually execute. Silence does something powerful to a person. Silence keeps the fire alive. When nobody knows what you are building, there is no pressure to perform for applause. There is no need to impress. There is no need to explain. You move faster when you stop carrying other people's expectations on your back. Most people don't realize this, but the weight of opinions is heavier than failure itself. Silence removes that weight. Think about how many ideas you had that died the moment you spoke them out loud. Not because the idea was bad, but because once people reacted, you changed. Some doubted you. Some laughed. Some said, "Be realistic." And some supported you in a way that felt good, but secretly made you lazy. Because once people clap early, you stop rehearsing. Once people praise the plan, you delay the execution. Winners understand something that average minds never do. Real power is built quietly. Real focus does not announce itself. The strongest people you know are usually the least noisy. They don't update the world every step of the way. They disappear. They work. They fail in private. They adjust in private. And then one day they appear different. Stronger. Sharper. More confident. And people say it happened overnight. But it never did. When you move in silence, you are not hiding. You are protecting your energy. Energy is limited. Every conversation costs something. Every explanation drains focus. Every argument steals momentum. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. It is choosing to invest your attention where it actually creates results. Most people crave attention before they deserve respect. They want to be seen starting instead of being seen finishing. But finishing is what changes your life. Finishing is what builds confidence. Not the fake confidence that comes from talking, but the real confidence that comes from proof. Proof that you showed up when nobody was watching. Proof that you kept going when motivation disappeared. There is a reason discipline grows faster in isolation. When nobody is watching, excuses don't work. There is no audience to impress. No sympathy to collect. It is just you and the work. And in that space, you discover who you really are. You learn whether you are serious or just emotional. Silence removes the mask. The world rewards results, not intentions. It does not care what you plan to do. It does not care what you almost did. It only reacts to what you actually did. And the irony is this: the less you talk about your goals, the more powerful they become. Because every silent day adds pressure inside you. Pressure to prove yourself. Pressure to make it real. And pressure, when controlled, creates diamonds. Focus in silence is not about disappearing forever. It is about timing. You don't need to explain chapter 1 of your life to people who are still stuck on the introduction of theirs. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. Not everyone understands growth. Some people only understand comfort, and they will try to pull you back into it. There will be moments when you want to speak. When you want someone to notice how hard you are working. When you want recognition for the effort, not just the outcome. That moment is a test. If you can pass that test and stay quiet, you level up. Because self-respect grows when you stop needing external approval. Winning in public feels powerful only because of the silence that came before it. The quiet mornings. The lonely nights. The weekends you sacrificed. The distractions you said no to. People see the victory, but they never see the discipline. And that's exactly how it should be. If you are in a phase where nothing seems to be happening, where progress feels slow and invisible, understand this. Silence often looks like stagnation from the outside. But internally, everything is changing. Roots grow underground before anything appears above the surface. And the deeper the roots, the stronger the rise. This audiobook is not here to make you loud. It is here to make you dangerous in the best way. dangerous to excuses, dangerous to comfort, dangerous to the old version of yourself. The goal is not to be admired early. The goal is to be undeniable later. So for now, say less. Do more. Let your habits speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your results introduce you. Because when you finally win in public, you won't need to explain anything. The silence will have already done the work. Most people will never admit this out loud, but not everyone around you wants to see you win. Some people like you exactly where you are, because your growth forces them to question their own comfort. Your silence threatens them more than your words ever could. When you talk about your plans, people feel safe. Plans are imaginary. Plans don't change the balance. But when you go quiet, when you stop explaining and start executing, people feel the shift. They don't know what you're doing, but they sense that something is happening. And that uncertainty makes them uncomfortable. Silence removes the invitation for opinions. The moment you speak, you open the door to doubt, advice, judgment, and comparison. Some of it sounds helpful. Some of it sounds caring. But most of it is noise. And noise is the enemy of focus. Focus needs space. Focus needs boredom. Focus needs repetition without applause. When you stay silent, you protect that space. There is a psychological trap most people fall into. They confuse being busy with being effective. Talking creates the illusion of movement. Explaining your goals feels like progress. But the brain doesn't know the difference between real achievement and social reward. When people nod, agree, or encourage you, dopamine is released. That dopamine is supposed to come from finishing the work. When it comes early, your drive weakens. You feel satisfied too soon. That is why so many people start strong and finish weak. They announce a new routine, a new business, a new version of themselves. They get attention for starting. But starting is easy. Anyone can start when motivation is high. The real work begins when motivation disappears and nobody is watching. Silence trains you for that phase. It forces you to rely on discipline instead of emotion. Confidence built in silence is different. It is quieter, but it is heavier. Loud confidence needs validation to survive. Silent confidence is self-contained. It comes from keeping promises to yourself when no one else knows those promises even exist. Each silent win stacks. Each private victory adds weight to your presence. You walk differently. You speak less, but when you do, people listen. Isolation is not loneliness when it is chosen. Chosen isolation is a training ground. It sharpens awareness. You notice distractions faster. You hear your own thoughts clearly. You stop performing and start becoming. This is where habits are forged. Not in crowds. Not in comments. In repetition. In routine. In quiet rooms where excuses have nowhere to hide. People often fear silence because it exposes them. When there is no audience, there is no one to blame. No one to impress. No one to distract you from the truth. Silence shows you exactly how disciplined you are, exactly how serious you are, exactly how much you want the life you say you want. And that honesty can be uncomfortable. But discomfort is where growth lives. When you focus in silence, time starts working for you instead of against you. While others are explaining, you are compounding. While others are seeking approval, you are building skill. While others are chasing motivation, you are building systems. And systems win when motivation fails. Every day you stay quiet and consistent, you pull further ahead without anyone noticing. That is the advantage. The strongest leverage in life is surprise. When people underestimate you, they give you room. They don't compete. They don't interfere. They don't copy. Silence creates that space. It lets you work without resistance. And when results finally show up, they hit harder because no one saw them coming. This is why winning in public feels effortless to those who mastered silence first. They already did the hard part. The discipline is already there. The habits are already formed. The confidence is already internal. Public success is just the echo of private consistency. If you are learning to stay quiet right now, understand this. It is not punishment. It is preparation. You are not falling behind. You are loading momentum. Every silent day adds pressure. And pressure, when directed, creates force. That force will eventually move everything in your life forward at once. You don't need to convince anyone of who you are becoming. You don't need permission to grow. You don't need applause to continue. The work knows. Your future knows. And when the time is right, the results will speak in a language everyone understands. Stay focused. Stay quiet. Let the gap between who you were and who you are becoming widen in silence. Because when that gap finally becomes visible, it will be impossible to ignore. Ego loves attention. It feeds on recognition, praise, and being seen trying. Discipline does not. Discipline prefers anonymity. The problem is that most people build their lives around ego instead of discipline, and ego is fragile. It needs constant confirmation. That is why people feel the urge to post updates, to explain progress, to let others know they are working on something big. It is not confidence. It is reassurance. Validation feels harmless, but it quietly rewires behavior. When approval becomes part of the process slows down. You start choosing actions that look impressive instead of actions that actually work. You choose what can be shown instead of what must be done. Silence breaks this cycle. It forces you to act without witnesses, which means the only reward left is progress itself. Fake support is one of the most underestimated dangers in personal growth. It sounds positive, feels encouraging, but it often comes from people who are not living the life you want. They clap, but they don't understand the cost. They say you got this without knowing what this really demands. And sometimes their support becomes a cushion, a place to rest instead of a push to move. Real discipline is lonely because it cannot be shared. You cannot outsource consistency. You cannot explain obsession. You cannot transfer hunger. Those things must be experienced in silence. That is why the gap grows between people who talk about success and people who actually achieve it. One group is loud and motivated. The other is quiet and committed. Ego wants to be right. Discipline wants to improve. Ego protects the image. Discipline destroys it and rebuilds it stronger. When you operate in silence, ego loses its audience. And without an audience, ego weakens. That is when growth accelerates. You become more honest with yourself. You admit mistakes faster. You adjust without embarrassment. Silence gives you that freedom. Most people cannot handle pressure because they train in comfort. They wait for perfect conditions, perfect timing, perfect motivation. Silence removes those excuses. When nobody knows what you are doing, there is no pressure to look good. You are free to be bad at first, free to fail, free to repeat. That freedom is what builds skill. Pressure reveals character. Some people break under it. Others sharpen. The difference is preparation. When you train quietly, pressure becomes familiar. You've already faced discomfort alone. You've already pushed without applause. So when the world finally watches, the pressure feels lighter. You've carried heavier weight in private. There is a reason people who win big often say very little about how they got there. Not because the story isn't important, but because most of the journey cannot be explained. It was internal, mental, repetitive, boring, silent. And those are things society does not celebrate, even though they are the foundation of everything impressive. Silence also protects you from comparison. When you don't announce your timeline, you stop racing other people's clocks. You move at the speed of mastery instead of the speed of social media. That alone gives you an unfair advantage. Because mastery takes time, and time requires patience. Silence trains patience. If you feel misunderstood right now, that is often a sign you are growing beyond the environment that shaped you. Not everyone will recognize the new version of you while it is forming. And that's okay. Caterpillars don't explain themselves to butterflies. They work in silence. The goal was never to impress people during the process. The goal was to change your life. And life changes when habits change, not when opinions change. Silent focus shifts habits faster than any motivation ever could. Eventually, there comes a moment when silence turns into presence. You walk into a room and something is different. You don't need to announce it. People feel it. That presence is earned, not claimed. And it only comes to those who were willing to work when nobody was watching. Isolation is often misunderstood. People confuse it with loneliness, but they are not the same. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Isolation, when chosen, is the presence of purpose. It is a deliberate narrowing of your world so your energy stops leaking in every direction. When you isolate with intention, you are not running away from life. You are preparing to meet it at a higher level. Momentum is not created through intensity. It is created through structure. Silence gives you the space to build that structure without interruption. You wake up at the same time. You do the work whether you feel like it or not. You repeat the boring actions until they become automatic. No announcements. No countdowns. Just quiet consistency. That is how discipline becomes part of your identity instead of a temporary phase. Most people fail because they rely on emotion to carry them. Emotion is unstable. It changes with sleep, with stress, with opinions. Silence removes emotional dependency. When nobody is watching, there is no performance. There is only commitment. And commitment survives when motivation disappears. That is why quiet routines last longer than loud promises. The days start to feel repetitive when you are doing real work. That repetition scares people. They want novelty. They want excitement. They want visible change every week. But real growth is subtle at first. It shows up in how you think, how you react, how quickly you recover from setbacks. Silence allows these internal changes to happen without interference. Discipline in isolation builds a different kind of strength. You learn to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking whether you feel ready. You act because it is time, not because it is easy. Over time, this creates momentum that feels unstoppable, not because it is loud, but because it is consistent. There is a moment in every serious journey where distractions lose their power. Not because the world gets quieter, but because you get stronger. Silence sharpens your attention. You notice how often people chase comfort. You notice how rarely people commit fully. And once you see that clearly, it becomes easier to stay on your path. Isolation also teaches you patience. Results take longer than people expect. Skills take longer to master. Character takes longer to build. Silence stretches your timeline, and that is a gift. Because the longer you are willing to work without recognition, the further you will go beyond those who need constant feedback. At some point, the work becomes personal. You are no longer doing it to prove anything. You are doing it because this is who you are now. The routine is no longer a sacrifice. It is a standard. And standards don't require motivation. They require respect. This is where momentum compounds. One disciplined day makes the next easier. One kept promise strengthens the next one. Silence stacks these wins quietly until they become part of your posture, your decisions, your presence. You don't force focus anymore. Focus follows you. People on the outside may think you disappeared. In reality, you evolved. While others were reacting, you were refining. While others were consuming, you were building. And this difference grows with time. The gap widens. And once it is wide enough, no amount of noise can close it. If this phase feels slow, trust it. Slow progress in silence often leads to sudden breakthroughs later. Not because they were sudden, but because nobody saw the preparation. That is the advantage of moving quietly. You are allowed to grow without being interrupted. Stay in this space long enough and something changes permanently. You stop craving attention. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing approval. And when that happens, you become extremely dangerous to mediocrity. Winning in public is rarely loud when it is real. It doesn't come with explanations or apologies. It arrives as presence. People notice it in how you move, how you speak, how you decide. By the time the world sees the results, the work has already been done. There is no rush to celebrate because the victory feels familiar. You've lived with it internally long before it became visible. Public success is simply the shadow of private discipline. Every quiet morning, every night you stayed consistent, every moment you chose progress over comfort. None of it was wasted. None of it was invisible. It was being stored. And when the time was right, it showed up all at once. Most people want recognition to feel motivated. But the ones who build something meaningful learn to reverse that relationship. They let results create recognition. They let proof replace promises. This shift changes everything. You stop asking for belief. You command it through consistency. There is a calm that comes with knowing you did the work. Not the calm of comfort, but the calm of certainty. You no longer fear being doubted. You no longer fear being underestimated. In fact, you welcome it, because you understand something now that you didn't before. The quiet path is the most powerful one. Legacy is not built through announcements. It is built through standards, through how you show up when nobody is watching, through the values you protect even when there is no reward. These choices don't trend. They don't go viral, but they last. And lasting impact always comes from invisible discipline. When you win in public, people will ask how you did it. Some will want shortcuts. Some will want motivation. Some will want the story without the sacrifice. You won't be able to give them what they want because what worked was silence, repetition, patience, and an uncomfortable amount of consistency. The strongest position you can reach in life is self-trust. Knowing that if things fall apart, you can rebuild. Knowing that if motivation disappears, discipline remains. That confidence doesn't come from talent. It comes from history, from remembering how many times you showed up when it was hard. At some point, you stop chasing success and start maintaining standards. That is the final evolution. Success becomes a byproduct, not a goal. You focus on who you are, not what you get. And that identity carries you further than ambition ever could. Silence taught you restraint. Focus taught you depth. Consistency taught you power. And winning in public taught you that none of it was accidental. You earned every inch of it. There comes a point where you realize silence is not just a phase, it is a lifestyle. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop chasing urgency that doesn't belong to you. You begin to move with intention instead of impulse. This is where most people never arrive because this level of calm requires discipline, not motivation. The strongest people are not rushed. They understand that speed without direction is just noise. They know when to wait and when to move. Silence teaches timing. When you stop talking, you start listening to patterns, to signals, to yourself. You notice what actually matters, and what matters is rarely loud. There will be moments when people suddenly notice you, when they ask what changed, when they want access to the version of you that discipline built. This is where silence protects you again. Not everyone deserves proximity. Not everyone respects the process. Some people only want the outcome without honoring the work. Silence becomes your filter. Power is maintained the same way it is built, quietly. Loud success attracts distraction. Quiet success attracts respect. When you don't advertise your moves, you reduce resistance. You stay unpredictable. And unpredictability is leverage. At a certain level, the goal is no longer to prove yourself. The goal is to stay sharp, to stay disciplined, to stay aligned with your standards. You measure progress internally, not socially. You don't need constant milestones. You trust the system you built. This is where most people relapse. They win once, then seek attention for it. They replace discipline with identity. They start protecting an image instead of sharpening their edge. Silence reminds you that you are never finished. You are either building or decaying. There is no neutral. You begin to understand that focus is not about doing more. It is about removing more. Removing distractions. Removing unnecessary conversations. Removing emotional decisions. Removing people who drain energy instead of multiplying it. Silence gives you clarity to make those cuts without guilt. Eventually, you reach a place where peace becomes your advantage. You are not easily shaken. You don't react to every opinion. You don't chase every opportunity. You move when it aligns. That calm makes you dangerous because calm people think clearly under pressure. Success feels different at this stage. It doesn't spike. It stabilizes. It becomes sustainable. You stop chasing highs and start building depth. And depth always outlasts hype. If someone listening to this is still early in their journey, understand this clearly. The quiet phase is not a delay. It is the foundation. Everything impressive you admire was once invisible. Everything strong was once silent. So continue, even when it feels slow, even when nobody notices, especially when nobody notices, because that is when the real work is happening. And when the time comes, when your results are undeniable, you won't need to say a word. Your presence will explain everything. If you stayed until this moment, understand something clearly. You are not here by accident. Most people quit when things get quiet. They need noise. They need motivation. They need someone to keep telling them who they could be. You stayed because you are ready to become it. This is not the end of the message. It is the beginning of the work. Nothing you heard matters unless it changes what you do when this audio ends. Silence is not passive. It is active discipline. It is waking up and choosing focus again. It is doing the work even when the world is distracted. You don't need to tell anyone what you learned here. You don't need to share your plans. You don't need to explain your next move. Apply it. Let time do its job. Let results handle the conversation. If this audiobook sharpened your mindset, don't reward it with words. Reward it with action. One disciplined choice today is worth more than 1,000 intentions tomorrow. Start small. Stay consistent. Protect your focus like it's your future, because it is. And when people eventually notice the change, when they ask what happened, you don't owe them a speech. You owe yourself respect. You showed up. You stayed silent. You did the work. That is how real wins are built. Stay focused. Move quietly. Win publicly. At a certain level of growth, noise becomes a liability. You start to notice how easily people give away their power by talking too soon, reacting too fast, and explaining too much. Silence, on the other hand, begins to feel like armor. Not because you are afraid of opinions, but because you understand how expensive distraction really is. Focus is fragile in the beginning. It breaks easily. One comment, one doubt, one comparison. That is why silence is not optional when you are building something real. It is necessary. You cannot afford to explain a vision that is still forming. Half-built ideas need protection, not exposure. Most people never experience true focus because they never stay with one thing long enough. They jump when excitement fades. They quit when results slow down. Silence forces you to stay. It removes the exit door. When there is no audience to impress, quitting becomes harder to justify. This is where mental toughness is formed. Not through motivation, but through repetition. Day after day of doing what you said you would do. Even when it feels boring. Even when it feels pointless. Especially when it feels pointless. Because that phase is where most people disappear. Silence teaches you how to sit with uncertainty. No feedback. No reassurance. No applause. Just work. And that discomfort is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is a sign you are doing something rare. There is a quiet confidence that grows when you stop narrating your life. You stop checking if people approve. You stop adjusting your pace to match others. You move at the speed of alignment. That speed may look slow to outsiders, but it is unstoppable. The longer you stay silent, the clearer your priorities become. You stop saying yes out of guilt. You stop chasing opportunities that don't align. You stop explaining why you are unavailable. Silence sharpens decision-making because it removes emotional clutter. At this stage, discipline becomes internal. You don't need reminders. You don't need quotes. You don't need hype. You have proof. Proof that you can be consistent without recognition. And that proof builds unshakable self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation of everything powerful. When you trust yourself, you stop seeking validation. When you stop seeking validation, you stop being manipulable. Silence strengthens this independence. Most people are controlled by reactions. They react to praise. They react to criticism. They react to trends. Silence breaks that loop. You respond instead of react. And that small shift changes everything. There will be moments when silence feels heavy. When you wonder if anyone notices. When progress feels invisible. That is when you must remember. The quiet phase is not about being seen. It is about being built. Nothing strong is rushed. Nothing lasting is loud at the beginning. The strongest foundations are poured underground, out of sight, under pressure. Over time, you start to realize that focus is not something you find, it is something you defend. Every day, the world tries to take it from you. Notifications, opinions, expectations, other people's urgency. Silence is the boundary that keeps your focus intact. It is the decision to stop being available for everything so you can become exceptional at one thing. This is where many people get uncomfortable. When you stop explaining yourself, some assume you are arrogant. When you stop sharing plans, some assume you are lost. Let them assume. Their assumptions cost you nothing. Explaining yourself costs you energy. And energy is the currency of execution. The deeper you go into focused silence, the less reactive you become. You no longer feel the need to answer immediately. You no longer feel pulled into every conversation. You become selective. And selectivity is a sign of maturity. It means you finally understand that not everything deserves your attention. At this stage, discipline starts shaping your identity. You don't force yourself to work anymore. You work because this is who you are now. The routine becomes familiar. The discomfort becomes manageable. The resistance becomes weaker. Silence turns repetition into power. Most people underestimate how much strength is built simply by not quitting, by staying, by showing up again when yesterday felt pointless. Silence removes the emotional drama from the process. It turns growth into a system instead of a struggle. You begin to notice something else as well. When you stop talking about your goals, your actions become sharper. You stop spreading yourself thin. You stop chasing 10 things at once. Focus naturally narrows. And when focus narrows, progress accelerates. There is a moment when silence becomes addictive in the best way. The peace, the clarity, the absence of unnecessary opinions. You protect it. You don't let chaos back in easily. You choose environments carefully. You choose conversations intentionally. This is not isolation from life. This is alignment with your future. The world is full of people who are constantly reacting to trends, reacting to news, reacting to other people's success. Silence pulls you out of that cycle. You stop reacting and start building. And builders always outlast reactors. When results start forming quietly at first, you don't rush to show them. You let them stabilize. You let them compound. You let them become undeniable. Because early exposure can weaken fragile progress. Silence protects momentum until it can stand on its own. Confidence at this level feels different. It is not excitement. It is calm certainty. You don't need to hype yourself up. You don't need to convince anyone. You know what you are capable of because you've tested yourself in private. People often ask how to stay consistent. The answer is simpler than they expect. Remove the audience. When nobody is watching, excuses lose their power. There is no one to impress, only standards to maintain. Silence enforces those standards. This is where focus becomes ruthless. You say no more than you say yes. You protect mornings. You protect energy. You protect momentum. You stop apologizing for discipline. You stop explaining your boundaries. Silence makes boundaries stronger. Eventually, the gap between you and your old life becomes obvious. Old habits no longer fit. Old conversations feel shallow. Old distractions feel expensive. This is not superiority. This is evolution. And evolution often happens quietly. If this process feels lonely at times, remember this. You are not alone, you are early. Most people arrive late to their own potential. You chose to arrive before the crowd. Silence is the price of that choice. You don't need to rush the reveal. You don't need to announce transformation. Let it unfold. Let it mature. Let it become part of who you are instead of something you perform. And when the results finally surface, when the difference is visible, people will call it confidence. They will call it talent. They will call it luck. You'll know the truth. It was focus. It was discipline. It was silence. If this audiobook is resonating with you, if it's sharpening your mindset and strengthening your discipline, stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook Spot. This channel exists for those who are building quietly and thinking long-term. No noise. No shortcuts. Just focus growth and real results. Apply what you hear. Protect your focus. Move in silence.